Pokemon Colosseum has always been considered quite an outliner among Pokemon games, and for a good reason, due to the unique experience it offers compared to what came before and even after it. Of course, this game is not without flaws, and I'm not the first one to consider that the story mode was quite short. You already start fighting Pokemon at level 25, skipping a fair chunk of a normal Pokemon adventure, and then in the post-game, the difficulty curve hits incredible spikes really quickly. Not only that, but some game-defining glitches like the infinite wall glitch or being able to use 2x items and save Pokemon go to show that Genius Sonority, the team that developed Pokemon Colosseum, didn't have enough time to polish all they wanted. But considering the studio was created only 17 months prior to Colosseum's release, I can understand they were time crunch. This game was a complete, yet unfinished, experience, and we could only imagine what it could have looked like if the dev team had had the time to fulfill its vision. But maybe we don't need to imagine anymore. I stumbled across the unused text section in the cutting room floor page for Colosseum, and I was shocked by the sheer amount of text that was left. And I'm not talking about the Japan exclusive content like the Celebi bonus disc or the e-reader content. Those have been covered many times by now. I'm talking about emails, trainer names, dialogue specific to basically all rooms in the game, and even snack list locations, with some even translated to the other languages that Colosseum was releasing. And so I thought to myself, what can we learn by paying attention to all of this? This became an extensive investigation over the span of literal days of session, where I carefully translated and organized all unused text, revealing a total of 23 additional Shadow Pokemon, around half of what is present in the final game. All of these Pokemon would be tied to their own side quests available after beating the game, explaining that lackluster post-game. With enough research, I could figure out mostly everything related to these trainers, with their trainer teams as the only part missing. I'll share my findings on this video, and I hope you all enjoy it. First off, we need to cover all the differences in the story mode compared to what the files reveal. This means mostly the shadow Pokemon that were replaced by others meant to appear in the post-game, but also unused lines and where they can be found. There isn't much to see going in story order, but it's still worth bringing up. You will need to activate the pedestal on the Phoenix City Pokemon Center. The actual gear on the windmill would be already in Pirate Town instead of making its way to the construction lot. And a beta interaction when winning a tournament uses the dollar symbol instead of Pokédollars, like all international Pokemon releases. Now, we find the first trainer with a changed Pokemon with our first visit to the Pirate Building. Cypher Pionore, the grunt that guides you inside the building after winning at the Pirate Colosseum, wasn't intended to use a Shadow Yanma at first, but rather a Shadow Spoink. And this change is understandable knowing why was Pokemon Colosseum created on the first place. For those unaware, this game was developed with a focus on reintroducing Gen 2 Pokemon that were not available in Ruby and Sapphire, and would still not be present with the Gen 1 remix, as the jam between the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance didn't allow for the transfer of these into the newest generation. And so, when realizing they wouldn't finish everything they had planned in time for the release, they prioritized adding at least the necessary Johto Pokemon for a national Pokédex, by removing other Shadow Pokemon if they had to. And let's be real here, would you have put the effort for a Grumpig when given a fully evolved Espeon with Return as starter? That Exapolk isn't really worth it. Our next trainer of interest is Hunter Token, the guy that guards the entrance to Pirate Cave, as instead of his Shadow Quillfish, he will instead use a Shadow Psyduck. This change also goes to show that Gen 1 Pokemon are or at least some of them, would still be available for capturing. But it also explains an oversight about this trainer. If you snag his Quillfish the first time you fight him in the story mode, it will hold a poison bar, the only way to obtain it in Colosseum. But if you instead come back for a rematch and snag it there, the Quillfish will not be held in a poison bar anymore. My bet is that when replacing this shadow Pokemon one for the other, they modified Dokken's themes but forgot to include this item for his second fight. Inside of Pirate Cave itself, we eventually come across Writer Josh, who uses a Shadow Dunsparce, who would instead originally have been a Shadow Baltoy. Like the previous replacements, they prioritized Johtonian Pokemon over ones you could capture in Ruby and Sapphire. But at least a Baltoy could prove more useful than a Shadow Spoink that could eat its ground type and levitate. Quite a pity on a double battle only game. Moving to a Gate Village, there's a change on the only trainer with a Shadow Pokemon in its place, Cypherpian Snurop. This guy is quite infamous for its slightly bigger importance than a normal peon, even if it just means being fought twice, and his ridiculous name, but also because of his Shadow Hitmontop, quite powerful when this is the last fight before you can even purify whatever is available to you. It seems this wasn't his intended Pokemon. As the game files reveal, he would instead use a Shadow Myjena, filling a similar role on the team, as both Pokemon have Intimidate as their own ability, but it also fits his personality better in my opinion. After obtaining the ability to purify Shadow Pokemon, you receive an email from Dukian that the Mount Battle is under attack, and these emails also went through an interesting change. Have you ever considered that the email system felt underused in the story mode? Well, it seems that this system was even more rudimentary in the early development at least, as there are copies for all the emails you get in the rooms you can first get them, except for the last, which was moved to the first email you get on the postgame. I can imagine that they will probably work like when you first pick one of the AIM files, describing the content of the email out loud and then having the option to check it on your PDA. But it was changed because you can even change rooms before you get that email, like I did here where I blocked Rui from speaking about the email. As a bonus, did you know you can receive 2 variations of the same email about the captured Cypherpians depending on whether you A list or not? I only noticed this while making research to pinpoint all of the unused dialogue, since the emails say practically the same but with a different sender. It's cool that the devs thought of this oversight. We can surprisingly skip the under for this section and go straight to the Shadow Pokemon Lab, which has a lot to talk about in contrast. There's an early description for the main get key and the starter switch, but also some dialogue implying that you will get into the main entry in a different manner. In the final game, you just need to open the door to the garage and fight the one scientist inside, so he drops the key after he runs away. However, from what I could put together, the original idea would involve us looking for the game key in the garage, he finding the scientist and grabbing him so he doesn't escape, and then fight him so he drops the key or hints where he left it. Among the trainers in the Shadow Lab, we have 2 with notable variations, Cypherpian Skull and Remil, who would originally have a Shadow Cast form and Shadow Pokemon respectively, replacing their Shadow Aipom and Vibrava. Both have something noteworthy, as the first already has a cast form on his team, so maybe they chose to leave it as a normal Pokemon instead of outright removing it. But the other marks the only of these beta Pokemon that was intended to be a Gen 2 Pokemon, but instead was replaced by a Hoenn Pokemon. I theorize that devs thought more on team balancing this time around, since this Vibrava works perfectly in the second level 43 capture that evolves 2 levels later. Furthermore, replacing Porygon 2 doesn't mean much, since it's across the evolution from Kanto, so its reintroduction was guaranteed. At Realgam Tower, on our way to defeat all Cypher admins, we find Cypher Peon Viola, who would use a Breloom instead of a Shadow Sunflora. Both are grass types, so the change fell fitting. But if this Breloom came with Spore as a move of Dana after purifying it, it could have worked as a good late game addition. Finally, at the small trainer gauntlet before Nazgor and Evice, we fight Rider Dylan and Cypher Peon Meta, meant to use a Shadow Lunatone and Solrock respectively before they gave them an Absol and Houndoom for the final release. Looking at the teams, it feels appropriate to think that these two have a night and day theme, and when they replaced Nella's team with Houndoom, they tried to keep the theme going with Absol. This brings the total count of replaced Shadow Pokemon to 9, and overall this new roster could have resulted in quite a different experience when team building. Unseek Castform or Spoink make the cut most of the time, but Hitmontop and Vibrava are candidates to make it on everyone's team on their first playthrough, myself included, although Porygon 2 is a solid Pokemon too. Furthermore, some of these Pokemon in the final cut come equipped with most of the type boosting items that would have been relegated to the postgame if they weren't changed to a different Pokemon, so perhaps the devs also intended for these items to appear elsewhere. Still, now that we have context on which Pokemon was meant to appear and who replaced them, we can properly discuss the post-game and the events surrounding these Pokemon, and some extra. As a heads up, most of the information from this point onwards was never localized, and I don't speak Japanese, so I use Google to translate and localize the names or fix weird phrasing where I could, but I'll leave the link to the Cutting Room Floors page if you want to check it for yourself too. Also, I want to thank Star, GameBeast92, and everyone on this Colosseum modding server that helped me with the process. This video couldn't have been done without you. The post-game would start the same as the final game. Sek would send us an email about how there are reports of a trainer with a shadow Pokemon on Pirate Town, and fighting with Gale reveals it's one of the Johto starters that you didn't pick at the start of the game. After snagging this starter at the Snagem Hideout, you will receive yet another email from Sek, this time about how Gale encountered a trainer with a shadow Quillfish. I cannot be certain if these events would go back to back, but Gale's dialogue leaves this clear: you will need to get the shadow starter first. After fighting and defeating the rogue, it vaguely described the trainer as Ames, and that he was indeed using a shadow Quillfish, and that he was beaten so hard he would restart his training. All while we get a couple emails from Bit about a trainer with a shadow Pokemon also in Pirate Town, this time a shadow Aipom. This would start the side story with one of the most infamous unused trainers from Pokemon Colosseum, the 6 Aipom Brothers. The idea was most likely given a second chance for a sequel, Pokemon XD, in the form of the Hexagon Brothers, but there would still be interesting differences between the two groups. Judging by the text, all of the brothers would be riders, and while there are some unused color variations for trainer classes I could eventually associate with these scrap trainers, none of them are for the rider class. So either the old colors needed for the Aipom Brothers were never implemented, or they will actually just look like the normal rider color, all 6 of them. And you will actually have to guess which rider was which. They will all use an Aipom on their team, of course, but only the eldest of the brothers, Ainz, would have a shadow Aipom. Since one of them must have shadow Quillfish, the other brothers would also have the shadow Pokemon, but we'll see which could be a bit later. Furthermore, instead of receiving names linked to their suit color and sex, the Hexagon Brothers would be named from numbers 1 through 6, from oldest to youngest, each translated to a different European language. Eins for 1 in German, dos for 2 in Spanish, trois for 3 in French, cuatro for 4 in Italian, 5 for, 5 in English, and sis, which could be 6 in Portuguese, but maybe it's just meant to be 6 in Japanese. For now, let's focus on their first count. After winning against Gale, they would appear in front of the Colosseum, like Pete said. Interacting with Ainz would not prompt a fight, and he would instead tell you to speak with your symbols, all sharing the same dialogue inside the name. By the way, did you like these intro animations? While researching how to recreate these trainers, I learned that all trainers have one, but they're only activated by giving them the camera intros that the main boss have, so I'll be showing them for the scrap trainers too. Anyways, after his defeat, the Aipom brother would tell the others to run away before he does too, with different dialogue depending on whether you spoke with Ainz or not. But this won't be the last time we see them. With that out of the way, next in line we have Shadow Dunsparce, and he was probably the hardest trainer to analyze, which is fitting for its theme. Once again, we would receive an email from Zek about a trainer with a shadow Pokemon, but this time the trainer is not on a specific location. I would need to look for him. To explain how difficult this trainer was to figure out, I need to go more in detail about my process on how I pieced together all of this information. In the game files, the trainer teams and the conditions for the battle are stored separately. This list mostly connect with a problem with each other. All trainers have a set number of teams depending on how many occasions you fight them and the variations this entail. For example, a mandatory story mode with a shadow Pokemon would have an odd number of fights, one for the initial fight and then a pair more for each time you find them, using one or the other depending on whether you have snagged that Pokemon. Some characters, like the ones at Dual Square or Real Colosseum, can be rematched immediately, so they need an extra team for that. And a couple trainers in Postgame only have a version of their fight if it's the last chance you have to snag their Pokemon, and instead would fight you until you take it from them. Lastly, if the remote chance you snag a shadow Pokemon on a mandatory fight still lose that battle, the devs solve this by giving these specific trainers a V variation of this fight with a shadow remove. And I really mean last, because all of these fights are all grouped together at the end of the trainer data, meaning they probably just realized the problem here at the last minute. The best example of this is with the Mixed Troop trio on their first counter, Fennec City. Each grunt blocks an entry and won't move until defeated, and each gives you an option for a guild to start at the snag. But theoretically, you could snag one of their shadow Pokemon and eventually lose the battle to snag the others. However, the developers foresaw the situation and added a flag so that when you try to fight a different mystery group, he mysteriously doesn't have a shadow Pokemon anymore. Most of the unfinished trainers for the postgame would only have a single fight until their shadow Pokemon is snagged, except for the Myth trainer, who doesn't have 1, 2, or even 3 possible fights, but rather 8. All of them at the very end of the battle strings. The problem arises when Myth is the only trainer to not be properly included in trainer, marking the biggest difference between the two lists. And when you try to load any of these fights, it doesn't reveal his model or even loads the placeholder team as the others. The snag list doesn't reveal anything in this situation either, since it leaves a blank space to use any of the possible rooms he would appear, and its interaction is stored in a folder separate from all specific rooms. So the only hint I had was that he would be fought 8 times, so he would appear on 8 different places. This was how I was planning to leave this section of the video, until when speaking with a friend and how there were textures for a Delcat to appear in the files for Taker. And I had an idea that could solve this. Remember the alternative colors I mentioned like 2 minutes ago? Well, by using the trainer list, I could figure out the trainer class for all of the unfinished trainers, which then allowed me to associate the trainer variation colors with them. But I didn't have one for a male chaser to use this last color. Therefore, by process of elimination, this pink-haired chaser had to be the Myth trainer. And sure enough, by dumping all textures and checking where the specific texture would appear, I could locate it on 6 random rooms, confirming my hunch. Additionally, I noticed the battle conditions do include the 8 locations where Myth would appear, the same ones where I found this texture. These possible locations are at Pirate Cave, twice on the room with a bandana guy and a chaser, and twice on sewers, the room leading to the relic stone, at the under subway, in the room with the elevator that Venus uses to run away from us, on top of Realgan Tower, just next to the elevators leading up to the Colosseum, and at the Snagem Hideout, right on the entrance. The only part I'm still not really sure about is his name, since when speaking with him he would be called Myth, and that's how his fights are naming, but he's not on the name list altogether, and it's probably why I couldn't load a fight with him too. At least there's a fine interaction on how his encounter will play out on any of the 8 possible occasions. He would introduce himself as a wanderer and challenge us. If we snag his shadow Dunsparce, he would no longer appear again, but failing to do so would make him move to another location, and he would notice that on a rematch, repeating the process until we snag that shadow Dunsparce. After this, Ned from the Under would notify us through an email about a trainer with Shadow Houndoom entering the Under Colosseum, unlocking a 5th bracket that can be seen on the trainer list too, right next to the others. Surprisingly, the localizers translated all of the tournament-related dialogue, probably because it was all on the same folder, so I'll be showing all of it here. In order, we would fight Ulcer, would be a bodybuilder, Barcliffe would be a mail writer, Saxman, who would be a worker, and finally Hunter Rite, who brings up that her Houndoom has Ember, in contrast to the Houndoom in the final game, which more probably uses Flamethrower since it's a post-game encounter. When failing to snag her Houndoom, Hunter Rite herself would send us an email taunting us that she will keep entering the tournament while she keeps her Shadow Houndoom. I don't imagine she would appear after snagging her Houndoom like Agnold, as the Dead King surprisingly has one of those alternative B battles without his Shadow Shackle, probably so the Dead King can still maintain his title. Then again, this is the last fight in the files, so maybe the devs thought he should still appear. Moving on, we would get an email from Egon, telling us to check on the TV and something else that gets cut off like his first email. Just like Rui would point out, checking on any TV would start a cutscene, with a newscaster interviewing a man from a gate village called Barb and how he was attacked by Roselia, with a suspicious trainer nearby. After this, we would go to speak with him personally to learn that this took place at Mount Battle, where the trainer would be waiting for us. Rita, a female cyberbeing with anger issues, would first ask us if we are motivated, and responding yes or no would get different answers. While speaking with her after knowing she's the trainer with the Shadow Roselia would prompt a rather childish dialogue and a fight in her frustration. After snagging her Shadow Roselia, she would calm down and make her think how she managed her rage. But if you fail to do so, she would just demand a rematch until you do snag that Shadow. Next in order would be Shadow Yanma on its intended spot, which also serves as the introduction for an unused recurring character, Malps, a member of Kid's Grid that will also help us on finding Shadow Pokemon. He would first tell us about the trainer with Shadow Yanma at Fennec City, a female chaser going by the name of Speeding Lady Dizzy. She would challenge us to a race, which we could accept or not, and according to the snag list, it would be possible to lose this race too. Catching up to her would allow us to fight her. If her Yanma wasn't snagged at first, you will need to challenge her to race again. And when defeated, she would protest that you cannot win by running. And I guess Yanma is a fitting Pokemon for her, with its speed boost ability, so it's better here than with a random Cypher piano. We now return to the Aipom Brothers, and since all of their encounters would play out the same and I cannot estimate the specific time they would take place, I'll cover them all now. Bit would send us an email saying that Ainz and his brothers were seen blocking an entrance somewhere, and giving you a chance to fight either of them. And each time you defeat one of the Aipom Brothers, they would reappear later down the line in a similar situation, losing one of their members on the way. It seems like Ainz will be present in all encounters. I imagine you will need to fight a new brother each time. After the final encounter, Pete would send us an email saying how all of the Aipom brothers were seen entering Pirate Cave. This is exactly why Ain has 5 fights, while the rest of his brothers have 6, since he would be unable to be fought on Pirate Colosseum at first. Going over how these encounters would play out, Ainz would have the same dialogue in all interactions, if chosen, while any of the brothers would say different dialogue and displays, but interchangeable between them, with the only difference on their names, just like the first time. Focusing first on the latter, their dialogue is not that special. They'll go on about their camaraderie, how much they admire their big brother, and how they want to spread the greatness of Aipom. They don't even go in detail on what they love about Aipom, they just state that it's a fact.
I just think they're neat.
They only get a unique dialogue at Pirate Cave, although they would still share the lost quote. Something that bugs me with this quote is that it sounds like they will only appear if you have fought them before and haven't snagged the shadow Pokemon, but their dialogue in previous locations implies they're always Ainz and would stop appearing once he. As for Ainz himself, his dialogue has an oddity I couldn't fully confirm. He would post about his shadow Aipom and the greatness of the long-tailed Pokemon, and if you defeat him without snagging it, he would just say their activities unfinished, and you will eventually find him at Pirate Cave, It Left for Last, where he would be rematchable until we snag that shadow Pokemon. However, when successfully doing so, in either situation, the text after the battle says we would receive an item, either just giving you the item during one of the choice fights or realizing it's the only way you would leave his brothers alone. It sounds like a really important item too, when even the snack list description would point out you got it. And I have 3 main theories for it. The first one is the Time Flute. Their acquisition is limited, with only 3 in the entire game, and the guardsmen for the Relic of Time would get new dialogue when the Aipom brothers enter there and then leave, but also when you speak to him with a Time Flute in your inventory. However, this last part is just a variation of a similar dialogue when you interact with this condition normally, so it may just mean nothing. My second theory, and more plausible in my opinion, is the UFO Disc D, the one you use to enter Deep Colosseum. It's the only important item you get in the postgame, and while you normally get this disc after defeating Gonzap again at the Snagem Hideout, it just randomly appears on the small desk on his office without any prompt for it. The only problem with this is how it screws with the difficulty curves when you get it on the first opportunity, but this game already has a quite an inclined curve anyways. Third and last possible item in my opinion would be a Lucky Egg, a missing item that was yet to be introduced until release of Fire Red and Leaf Green next month, and even then only having a small chance to come equipped on Wild Chansey. This Lucky Egg would come in handy even in the post-game, and it was on the files already, so it's not like they will lose time programming it, while it also works as a small reward for finding Ainz if you want to use it earlier. Additionally, Pokemon XD also has a side quest with a Lucky Egg as the final reward, so the devs could have once again repurposed this idea for the sequel. We need to cover the Shadow Pokemon for each Aipom brother. Ainz would clearly have the Shadow Aipom, and one of the younger brothers would have Shadow Quillfish, that was previously mentioned. So the other 4 brothers must have the remaining Shadow Pokemon that aren't mentioned anywhere else on the news text, and appear after the order shown on the index numbers on the debug screens. Assuming those would have Shadow Quillfish, the order would go like this: Shadow Corphish for 2, Shadow Spheal for 4, Shadow Sandslash for 5, and Shadow Magikarp for 6. I don't know if keeping most of the Shadow Pokemon on their unevolved forms was to nerf them, or as a way to show that the Aipom brothers were just given the scraps on the Shadow Pokemon created. The most valuable Pokemon here could be the Shadow Magikarp, because each Shadow Pokemon comes with 4 moves, while the Goldfish Pokemon can only learn 3, so this will mean he will forcibly receive at least 1 new move to fill the slot. Maybe reverse or even Dragon Rage like those event Magikarps. Finally, moving on from the brothers, we have a simpler yet more interesting Shadow Pokemon to discuss: Shadow Chimecho. This side quest would start with an email by Chief Charles, letting us know that someone anonymously sent a photo to the police station about a trainer with a supposed Shadow Chimecho. Speaking with them in person will reveal much information about the location of the trainer or whoever sent it. But thanks to the snack list data, we can determine he would be located in a gate village, specifically under the big tree. I want to take a brief moment to point out that these unused snack list descriptions go into way more detail than the ones we can properly see in the final game, which finally gives a purpose to net mentioning that all the information on shadow Pokemon would go directly to our PDA. Anyways, this trainer would be a male hunter named Kurajim, and he would brag about winning the Colosseum, hence how he got that Shadow Chimecho. And like the others, he would be available for rematch on the same place until you snag said Pokemon. After this, we would finally get the third Johto starter from the last mystery group we haven't fought yet at the Cypher Lab. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to find out when we would encounter him like the Aipom Brothers. But thankfully, the devs left Kirk's fourth fight during the side quest, the one where the Underwriter has finally evolved his Wailmers into Wailmers, right between the index numbers where he will appear. In fact, his Pokemon team is the second to last that can be found on the trainer data, showing they were really close not to finish the strictly necessary content in time. The last team is also part of the only trainer from this postgame that barely made it in. Can you guess who? Next, we have the shadow Pokemon that players have pondered the most on why it wasn't included in the first place, Shadow Minun. We would first get an email from Meg, who surprisingly doesn't send us any on the final game, even when we directly gave our PDA number to her. She would warn us that a Shadow Minun had been seen at the entrance of Pirate Colosseum. There's dialogue for the man right next to the abyss about this Shadow Minun, but I think he would not say anything at first, but instead we would need to speak with the other NPC here. Bodybuilder Hazer. Hazer has one fight without any shadow Pokemon and only battles you after Dukin's first email without any reason. Furthermore, all other static trainers from Pirate Town placed together on the index trainer order. Hazer's one fight is at the very end. However, what's to note, alongside Gale's dialogue about Shadow Mine as well, finally answers what was his purpose, becoming available to fight for the side quest and guiding you towards speaking with Fatina. Did you ever wonder why Plusle decided to join you after defeating Minor B, even if it was far weaker than the Pokemon at that point of the story? This event would answer this question as well, as Fatina would see on her magic ball that there's a mysterious trainer in the desert, and apparently showing us a photo about it. But she would also tell us that the plus-shaped tail Pokemon and the minus-shaped tail Pokemon are calling out for each other. The fortune teller would guide us to the Cypher Lab, to a female Cypher peon called Milky, who got there with the intention of checking the Shadow Pokemon Lab, but realizes we are after her Minun. Surprisingly, the battlefield for her fight is outside the Cypher Lab, and this battlefield is never used in the final game, but is fully implemented for Milky and other trainer data. Honestly, it's a shame, it looks pretty good. In contrast, this other battlefield for a battle inside the Mount Battle lobby that I couldn't find a fight assigned for. So even with all of the post-game content restored, this battleground would go through the news. Coming back to Milky, right after successfully snagging her Shadow Minun, Meg would send us an email reminding us about the properties of the Kecleon duo when fought together, and even the snack list would remind us on how Plus and Minun make them stronger when together. However, unlike most other trainers in the post-game, if you were to fail in snagging her Shadow Pokemon on this opportunity, Milky would just disappear, and you will need to wait for another email from Meg that will make you speak with the guy at the entrance of Pirate Colosseum. I imagine it would be now how when Meg would send us an email letting you know that Milky has appeared at Realgam Tower. This fight doesn't look repeatable either, since Milky only has dialogue for before and after battling, and the information for the snack list and Meg's emails is repeated. So I imagine you will repeat the process alternating from one variation from the other. Honestly, this is the only side quest that should have been present in the story mode, replacing Meg with Marcia as the one sending us in the email, and it could work well to first guide us to the Shadow Pokemon Lab, since the spot just can't appear on the map. After getting this Minun one way or the other, we would move to the Shadow Sunflora trainer. This time, the trainer becoming the most remarkable of this side quest. We would first receive an email from the legendary King of Shadow Grass Pokemon, also known as Pelargus. which is probably the best game in the entire game. He would let us know that he was the one to send us photos about the Shadow Chimecho, and as a reward, he wants a fight with us against his Shadow Sunflora. I imagine the email would include a photo of him in front of Outskirts stand, since that's where we would find him according to the room dial. Thanks to this, I could also find out that this trainer would use an appropriately green color bodybuilder look, which surprisingly doesn't go unused, as this random trainer at Colosseum uses it for some reason. I don't know if this was a mistake or one of the devs just felt like such a nice color shouldn't go unused. Ballardas would comment that he sent the pictures of shadow Pokemon so we would eventually snag it and purify it, so there would be fewer shadow grass Pokemon. And Rui would be baffled and correctly say that Chimecho is not a grass type Pokemon, but a psychic type. This one line led to many fans assuming the Shadow Grass Pokemon King would be the one using this Chimecho. But all this time, he would just be confused that it wasn't a grass type even when he hangs from trees, which hey, happens to the best of us. Of course, after this interaction, we would start a battle, and if you snag his Shadow Sunflora, he would self-remove his own title since he obviously doesn't have Shadow Pokemon anymore. And he would be available to fight on a rematch on the same position if we were to fail this process. After sadly saying goodbye to the Shadow Grass Pokemon King, Dukin would talk to us about a trainer with a Shadow Vibrava joining the Pirate Colosseum tournament, again unlocking a 5th set of battles in said Colosseum. I haven't commented on this yet, but for most of these side quests, there would be some small dialogue from whoever would start it, reminding about what they said in their email or if the information was useful. And Dukin's variation specifically mentions they would be watching your battles in the Colosseum, which I find quite wholesome. Going into this tournament, like the one with Shadow Houndoom, all trainers' dialogue was fully localized, so I can enjoy those screens. These trainers would be called Posse, who would be a male rider, Lesal, would be a street performer, not to get confused with Cypher being Lesal, because this game just doesn't have enough original names. Psyduck would be a female chaser, and finally, Forten, a bandana guy who directly mentions his Shadow Vibrava on his pre-battle dialogue. Once again, if we were to fail to snag his Vibrava on our first try, we would receive another email from Dukin letting us know that Forten would keep participating in the party tournament while he still has his Shadow Pokemon. Next, we would have to visit the Snagem Hideout once again after Pit gets news that Snagem are making some moves. Not only it seems that we would receive a bit more build-up with a third email, but the variations for the other two emails using game would reveal that the Snaggrams, Biden and Gref had their Shadow Pokemon change later in development, just like the other trainers in this tournament. Instead of the Shadow Earthring Smeargle they normally have, the Shadow Pokemon Index and Pit's email reveal they will instead use a Shadow Electro and a Shadow Snora. And just like in the final game, after defeating Gonzap with his Caramel Snag, you would be able to attend the Deep Colosseum for a rematch with the Cypher admins and the Tip King. For some reason, all of these bosses have an extra dialogue on the files, with not having a complete set. So maybe they would use one or the other depending on whether they had their Shadow Pokemon or not. While the Deep Colosseum is the last stop before the Shadow Togetic you can normally get in a base game by snagging all other Shadow Pokemon, the post-game would go for a while longer instead. And it is now time for my favorite side quest to not make the cut, Shadow Teddiursa and Shadow Hitmontop. Teddiursa was the only Shadow Pokemon that was replaced by its evolved form, Earthring, and so it needed a new index location. The game has two sets of placeholder slots for Shadow Pokemon. Although it first has Shadow Extra from 30 to 49, with Earthring for some reason in the middle of it, and then 1 to 30. Lining up the Shadow Pokemon in the order I've been mentioning it, Shadow Teddiursa would go in the same space Earthring occupies in the Shadow Extra part. So my theory is that they added these placeholder extras to fill in space after they realized they will have to scrap Postgame entirely, and a Snagem Hideout wouldn't look good using a cute Pokemon like Teddiursa. Moving into this side quest, Meg would send us an email about a trainer in Pirate Town with a Shadow Teddiursa, and after a while she would continue on this trail. This trainer would call herself per tamer, and Kale will add her name, girl called Beyond, which would use this unique leathery color. Like they said, Beyond would be found at Tool Square, asking not to underestimate her battling skills, and boasting about her Teddiursa. If we don't snag her shadow Teddiursa the first chance, she would keep her confidence about her Teddiursa and would fight again until we succeeded in catching her Pokemon, making her run away crying to her mommy. Right after this, we would get another email from Meg, this time informing us that about a trainer with a Shadow Hitmontop was spotted on Venus' abandoned studio. Getting there, we would find a female bodybuilder avoiding any connection with a Hitmontop and tries to throw us out unrelated to Hitmontop's way of attacking, of course. Afterwards, what I imagine as leaving to another location on the map, Mopes and Meg would send us emails about a really angry woman looking for us for some reason, eventually leading us to our fight with Kale for extra info. This will be the sixth and final team that Kale will use to fight him, probably with all Pokemon with levels in the mid-60s, and since he has two variations for each battle, with and without his Shadow Forest, the road trainer would have a total of 12 different possible fights, the most of any trainer in the game, which he already has with 8 in the final game. After winning against Kale once again, he would describe the woman chasing us as a powerful and amazing trainer by the name of Keiko, and that she would look for us at the underground, right where we first heard of the Shadow Hitmontop in Venus' studio. Visiting that abandoned studio once again, we would find Keiko accompanied by a familiar face that would also recognize us, Pian from Dual Square. She would still be pissed at how badly we would defeat her, and it would be revealed that Keiko is her mother, and the bodybuilder was looking out for us because we made Pian cry after that win. That's right, we would literally send a little girl crying to her mommy. It seems the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, since the bodybuilder would also be stubborn and would keep fighting us until we snag her Shadow Hitmontop, where she realizes that we are just too strong, and instead would advise her daughter to become physically stronger like her, with Pian taking this motivation to her heart. For me, this side quest with Keiko and Pian is the biggest loss from this unfinished postgame, not only because it's really hilarious, but because it would have been incredible if the Colosseum sequel had Pian return as a jack bodybuilder without any other reference, and I would just have to assume she grew muscles in honor of her mom. Moving on, we have yet another Shadow Pokemon that was relocated to another trainer in the final game, first starting with an email from Marcia that only sends us one email in the final game. She would let us know about a troublemaker painting graffitis around Pirate Town and using her Shadow Pokemon to attack, with a later email revealing it's appropriately a Shadow Smeargle. The owner of the Shadow Pokemon would be a street performer called Atri, and she would appear in the abandoned pirate building, making us run the gauntlet of trainers to reach her. From what I interpret with this dialogue, we would first interact with her on the first floor twice, so she has a time to finish a thumb. Then she would move to the third floor and would hate our persistence and finally battle us. We can make an educated guess and say her team would be the same as the trainer that received her Shadow Smeargle. Snagem grunts yo, just all Smeargles with random attacks and actually not stay on the same place in case you didn't snag her Shadow Smeargle, and instead would just move one floor up, getting even more frustrated with us. I would say the same in either occasion when snagging her Shadow Pokemon. But in the second situation, she will mention that she will draw on her face, similar to what the Snagem brand says in the final game. Hey, we just had a mother-daughter duo with Shadow Pokemon. Maybe Biden and Atri are also related and both would use more Smeargle on their teams. Wouldn't that be fun? Now, here's where the order gets a bit weird. While the next Shadow Pokemon in debug strings is Shadow Togetic, the Shadow Pokemon from the Aipom Brothers, there's actually 5 extra Pokemon that appear separated from the list, which makes me think they were planned even later developed, but once again scrapped due to lack of time. The first of them would start with Mopes, finally living up to his email name, and will send us a photo about a trainer with a Shadow Absol, leaving up to us to figure out where he was located with that one photo. Thanks to the snack list, we can have he would appear in front of the stairs leading up to the Untold supply platform. And since the trainer names in the file seems to be in order, he would also have been a Nanagai called Furia. he will be training with his shadow Absol, commenting that it goes into hyper mode easily. And it's interesting to see someone else mention the mechanic, as any opponent's shadow Pokemon never entered the state, although in the universe they clearly have to. He would sound like a really energetic trainer, just being open to fight for the sake of training, although he would clearly only stay reliable until we snagged his shadow Absol like the rest. Next in the group we have your Locket, or at least that's how this female chaser would have called herself in the email that would send us notifying us that she would wait with her shadow Whiscash on the usual place. Snag list comes in clutch once again, since the description for the side quest explains that this email would come from with photos and that this place would be at the eastern entrance of Phoenix City. Like she said, Loget would be waiting here. Rui would act even more confused, pointing out she was the one that sent him an email, making her realize she sent an email to the wrong address. Now that she was at it, she would fight us with a shadow Whiscash, and once again she would stay there until we snag it, making her drown in her small self-worthiness.
Good.
Next in line, we have another shadow Pokemon related to Malps, but it seems this Riddle Lover would have been the one played this time, as he was caught while scouting a female hunter with shadow Xatu, and he would send us emails on the run. Each email would send us a different location, which would update with a new email as we get to the spot, with Malps eventually hiding in Pirate Gate. On what I think is the room we'd find the girl pursuing him, Sanari, who would show herself infuriated for Malps taking a photo of her for free, she would choose to fight us for getting on her way. Like most of the previous trainers, she would be available for a match until we return and we haven't snagged her Xatu. And when succeeding, she would run away and immediately receive a final email from Malps, thanking us for our help and that he would act more careful when taking photos of people. Now for quite a surprising side quest from start to finish. We would first receive an email from Police Officer Johnson, once again another prominent NPC that would have been active on the web. There he would warn us of watching the news immediately, despite revealing he shouldn't be watching it on patrol hours and implore us not to tell the chief. Interacting with NTB would prompt another report, this time about Shadow Wobbuffet attacking, something outright impossible when this Pokemon cannot learn any attacking moves. This footage was sent to the studio by an anonymous person by the pen name of Gears Turn for 30 Gear, which obviously brings us to the old man operating the windmill at Pirate Town. The gear operator would act surprised someone figured out who he was so fast, and would also reveal that he took the footage on the former hideout, Mirror B, after skipping warp, shocked by an attacking Wobbuffet. The identity of its trainer Blacksmillions in the postgame. This is where you can rematch the duo of Ria and Firma if you haven't snagged their Shadow Regret and Mantine. Until I realized that there was an additional trainer that could be fought there, yes, a really secure one. Miracle B. This name could be familiar for some of you, but it's a really missable character to find. He would only appear during the story mode, in between getting Duggin's first email and beating Evice, and his team revolves around being a cipher peon that heavily admires, when down to using his colors and a distorted version of his theme. I guess the devs thought this guy was just really funny and charming, and chose to keep it without his original purpose. Just like the game, thanks to these secret boss patterns, we actually have party data, and we can assume in the first version he would have used the same Pokemon, yes, with higher levels and a Shadow Wobbuffet in the 6th slot. He would use a technique called auto-sabotage, where some of his Pokemon would run Explosion or Self-Destruct, while the others run Protect. So one of the Pokemon flows without damaging their team. However, a less common property of these moves is that if a Pokemon is hit with them while in the encounter, it treats this as if it had been attacked by an enemy Pokemon, and can deal huge damage to whoever it had assigned counter in the first place, and can deal huge damage. Combine this with Wobbuffet being explicitly designed to endure powerful blows and deal them back with its high health and ability to trap opponent Pokemon, and you have yourself a really annoying fight. However, when I tried to at least get footage from this guy using the Protect Explosion strategy, he would never use it no matter the condition was optimal for it, because his Pokemon are programmed to be too damn trigger to use it. So here's a footage of someone ironically playing Grand Colosseum and how he was hit with the same strategy. Last on the Riddle group, we have Molps once again. Only this time we have Lady Riddles, sending us an email about how he managed to get a Shadow Wailmer and that he would be waiting for us at the lobby of Realgon Tower. There, he would formally reveal himself after only speaking to him through the PDA, using the second rich boy color on the files, and how on his journey of becoming a photographer, he became interested in Shadow Pokemon and wants to test with us if he can control one of them. No matter if we snag the Shadow Wailmer first or not, the kid would realize he cannot tame beasts like Shadow Pokemon, and is really glad that we snagged it from him, and will fight us once again. If we didn't snag it, he could just give us the Shadow Wailmer if he was worried about it, but judging from his loose dialogue, he wanted to experience how we snag a Shadow Pokemon firsthand. As for the last Shadow Pokemon with an unused side quest, we have Shadow Kecleon. We would receive an email from the trainer of this Shadow Pokemon, with a catch that there would be 3 variations for it. All 3 follow the same structure. A bandana guy, called a bandana boy in this email, by the name of Longo, would got his hands on a Shadow Pokemon, and would not allow anyone to battle him as long as they say to him the correct password, which would be the subject of the email. You can use each location to determine which email and subject name would be used respectively, so I can show it on screen. Longo would respectively appear in these places in front of Pyro Colosseum. The question would be between Loudred and Explode. At the entrance of the Shadow Pokemon Lab, would ask between Buck and Kramer. And at the entrance of the Snagem Hideout, he would ask between Whiscash and Barbolge. Responding correctly would result in a battle, like I said, but giving the wrong answer or just losing without snagging the Shadow Kecleon would probably just make him move to another location until succeeding. And finally, if we snag all 70 Shadow Pokemon until now, we would start the Shadow Protect side quest. Only this time with a less level gap after all of the additional fights we would have to endure. And there we go, all 23 unused Shadow Pokemon, with their intended method to obtain them explained in detail. Looking at all this, it would have made for quite a lengthy postgame, making you backtrack throughout basically all parts of the map, probably adding at least 6 more hours of gameplay with the additional process of purifying all of these Shadow Pokemon. Despite the sheer amount of the text I've just discussed, there is also extra unused stuff I couldn't find a use for, like unused NPC names without any fight assigned to them, although some of them have dialogue for a fight in Mount Battle or Battle Soon, and Rui apparently was able to store items for us at one point if we got a full inventory when in the final game, but it would have interrupted the flow of this video when it was already way longer than I expected. Lastly, I want to count the theoretical number of maximum Pokemon you would be able to hold at once in Pokemon Colosseum if we had access to everything this game has and would have. You can receive 4 non-Shadow Pokemon, 6 by counting the Celebi and Pikachu from the Japanese bonus disc, and 48 Shadow Pokemon in the final game. Adding the 23 scrap Shadow Pokemon, plus the 3 Shadow Pokemon from the e-reader, leaves the final count at 80 Pokemon. And considering you have space for 96 Pokemon in the final game, you would still not need more than 3 damn boxes. But anyways, here's everything I had to show about this really interesting postgame. I wanted to make a video about this for a couple months now, and even later in Photoshop and basic modding tools to recreate the postgame as best as I could, because no one was probably ever going to cover it, and it deserved to be shown. Hell, I only used my real voice for this project because I didn't want to show a lot of text narrating the copious amounts of unused decks already. My hope for this video is to attract even more talented people into the Colosseum modding community, so that this game can flourish beyond of what can be done now, and just more eyes of these underrated games. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, and until I decide I want to make a big video like this again. See ya!